Welcome to the podcast, Chardét. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
It's awesome when I get to chat with someone who speaks the same language as me, and I mean the language of girls empowerment and women empowerment. And it's so good to highlight you and all the amazing things that you're doing to really bring to the forefront this like movement of body positivity and women celebrating themselves and girls celebrating themselves. What I'd love to know is, how did you get here? Like, why this topic? Why now?
It's been a windy road. Let's just say that. It's been very windy. So I'm a bit different because I was in the fitness world for almost a decade, but I started out in corporate. So I didn't, go in and do my whole physical certification when I was 18. I did not plan to have this life at all. I was going to be a diplomat. That's what I was studying for. Very different life.
Right.
And the things I've done, I never, the amount of skin I've shown, I would never have done that in that life. But but yeah, so I think that what happened was I really wanted to have impact and I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know how to express that, especially because I'm an older millennial. That generation, it was not as easy as it is now to do those kind of things or as acceptable. And I think I tried to do things the way that everyone said to do it. Go to school, get your degree, then you get employed by a big company, then maybe one day you do what you actually want to when you're 50. So that was what I started with. And it just didn't work for me. I was in very male dominated spaces that at the time were not accepting of women, and there was some outright sexism, and I felt very marginalized. I felt that I was losing some of the empowerment that I had felt most of my life because I grew up with a really strong mom.
Mm.
And I made the decision because it was so mentally difficult for me to just quit. So I left my career. I was 26, 27, and I went to Brazil, which I'm half Brazilian, so it's my happy place.
Nice.
And there I kind of just reconnected with my body, with myself, with my power again, because I really did feel completely depleted when I left. And I was also in New York, which, is super high strung energy.
That's where I am.
Is that where you
Yeah.
are?
Although
I
I'm
had a
on the
sense you
outs,
might
like
be
I'm
there.
I'm in the suburbs. I'm not in the city,
Okay.
but I know what you mean, because even just here in Long
Yeah.
Island, it can be a little much sometimes. So I feel you.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
did it right though. I think you got to be a little bit outside and you can
Right.
come in for the fun, but being in the center of it, it just wears on you after a few years.
For sure.
So that was the beginning of the journey, was going to Brazil and reconnecting with my body and realizing that I didn't want to go back to a life where I felt so separated from it and so disempowered.
Mm. Oh my God, that's so powerful. I mean, the first thing is really like that I was hearing you say is like giving yourself the permission to walk away from something that you thought you wanted and needed to do. And you
Yeah.
had all the good reasons, and you said, I just quit. And I love that, because sometimes, there's such a stigma associated with quitting, like the word quitting. And sometimes it's excellent to be a quitter because you're moving in the direction of your heart. And when you know it so deeply, then saying yes to yourself in that way is such like a revolution, right? Especially for women. It's like literally a revolution. So I love that you gave yourself permission to do that. And of course, like, I'm wondering, why is it that in Brazil you were able to find yourself? Like, what is it about the culture there that brought you to this space?
I guess I didn't know it at the time. I couldn't really put words to it. It was just a sense. And we have this a lot, this sense of places or people that called to us, and we don't really know why. And for me, that was Brazil for a long time. But what I can say now is I think that because it's so open, there's not a lot of repression in terms of how you relate to your bodies, your sexuality. Like, it's very open here. And I think that living that life where you can just be completely who you are. I mean, you see all kinds of bodies as well in bikinis. Like, everyone is just doing it. There is diet culture here, but there's this also acceptance of the body
Mm.
and the idea that all bodies are okay.
Mm.
And all bodies can wear different outfits and all bodies can wear bikinis. And also this focus on health, like especially here in Rio. I'm actually back here now for
Nice.
the winter. And it's the same focus of there's so much attention to health. People will be running. You'll see 80-year-olds running along the beach. You'll see people, having a nice juice and just sitting down. There's just this attention to balance. And I think that that's the combination of the balance and the body acceptance is what really just kind of refreshed me.
Wow, that is refreshing. It really just sounds so good. And it's my wish for every girl and woman, right? To celebrate themselves in that way, to just like you said, all bodies are beautiful bodies.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be so nice if every young girl could know that? And I'm wondering, does that culture trickle down into the younger generation? Are girls taught to celebrate themselves in Brazil? And if so, how do we bring some of that here? I know we're on a mission and we're trying to do it, but there's too much that's challenging our girls right now in the media and culture and Photoshop photos and filters. And it's so much pressure for these girls to be who they are, when everywhere they look, someone else is telling them who they should be and what they should look like.
Yeah, I will say this. I think it has changed here a lot since when I first came, which was, 15 years ago. But so there is a little bit of that still. There's definitely the pressure, the filters, always having the makeup on, being a certain size. But there's still this underlying current of not having the body shame. And I think that that is the biggest thing. If you don't have body shame and you don't have this constant message about it, it changes the way, even if you are someone who ends up going on a diet or feeling different in your body, if you're not constantly told that you're wrong, that it's evil, like all these messaging that we get, I feel that it changes you and you can be a little bit more grounded. And I do see that with people here, that some of the people don't think twice about putting a bikini on. And it took me until I was 30 to be comfortable with it,
Wow, that is something.
Yeah.
Body shame. You said this, body shaming. Can you tell us in your own words, what is body shaming and how is that something that our girls and women are experiencing always more than men, really? Men can do and be whoever they want, it seems. And as women, there's so much scrutiny about the way that we look, about the way our bodies look.
Yeah, the shame I feel comes from a few different places. So, first, you have the social shaming, right? The idea of it's a girl's responsibility to cover up or act a certain way. This still exists so that men don't respond. It's up to us to make sure men behave properly. And so there's that shame around revealing your body and what it means if you do reveal it or if you wear something that somehow conveys that you're easy or you're less intelligent or anything like that. So there's the social messaging around that. Then you also have the parental messaging, which is something I never got, thankfully, but I know that a lot of women in my life have, of this, small messages, things like, oh, you don't want to eat that again because it'll add to your belly. Oh, didn't you just eat? We're not going to have any more food here. Your shorts are getting a little tight. All of these comments that teach women to be uncomfortable in their bodies. And a lot of times I don't think parents even realize they're doing it. It's just so common that they don't think about how they might be harming their children without realizing it. And if you hear that message for 10 years, it's a lot of time to unlearn it. So I think that it's the social level, but it's also the parental level. And then you have it kind of internalized from both of those. So if you hear it so many times out here and in the home, then you start to develop this inner voice of always criticizing different parts of your body, never feeling like you should wear something or go for something or be around someone. And it doesn't seem to be related to, it's not relegated just to people who are in bigger bodies. I see this with people who are in smaller bodies as well.
Wow. Yeah, you're so right. That parental messaging is so important. And even myself, I'm sure that I have said things I dwell in this world. This is what I live and breathe. And I'm sure I've said certain things about food with a health focus, right? Because I'm a health coach also, and it's important to me that my kids are eating healthy foods. But sometimes even our well-meaning messages can be heard from our girls in a different way than we intended. And I think part of that is because of what's going on outside of the home as well. Like, I remember when I was, I don't know, from the time I was probably about 12 until I got married, I remember people saying to me, like in my family unit, like not my parents, but just like people would see me and be like, oh, you lost 5 pounds. Oh, you gained 5 pounds. Oh, your butt got bigger. Oh, and it's like, oh my goodness. And like, boy, did that sit with me. Like it really sat with me. Thankfully, I like to think I have a beautiful relationship with my body today, and that's taken a lot of work. But that I would be kidding myself if I said that I didn't still hear those words, somebody else's words that were creating my reality. So it's like, how do we get, and I think we can brainstorm on answers to this, but I'd love to know your thoughts. It's like, how do we get the parents to give the right messaging to the kids? How do we reach them other than things like podcasts like this and books? Like, are they going to listen? Are they going to pick up a book that talks about this? And B, we can't control everything and everyone, and our kids are not always with us, right? There will be other people feeding them other messages. So like, what do we do? How do we protect them from this world that is just constantly telling them who to be? And I keep going back to that phrase, but it's just so true.
And what you said is so accurate in many ways because, for example, I told you my mom, and I was raised mostly by my mom, and she never, ever once said any messaging that made me feel self-conscious in my body, even when I had gained quite a bit of weight. But I still felt this shame because outside of the home, like you're talking about, you can do everything right as the parent. You can say everything properly, but in the end, they're still going to have friends and peers and messaging. And especially now when they're online all the time, it is hard. So the biggest thing that I find from speaking with other parents and just also working with clients is if you can introduce messaging. So it's hard to watch what you say all the time. It's very easy that maybe something slips. That's very hard to do, but you can consciously add in messaging. You can say things like, oh, you're getting so strong from this activity, right? Like, I'm so proud of you for getting so strong. Or other things not related to their body in terms of accomplishments or the way that they look. One of the things, I had a parent come on the show on my podcast a month ago, and she said something really lovely, which is when her girl is outgrowing outfits, she doesn't say you're too big for them. She says, oh, you're growing up so much, you're growing so tall, we need to get you outfits for growing up, for being an adult. Right. And that, I think, is a small thing because it's very easy to say, oh, you're too big for this, or this outfit's too small for you, you know?
Right, absolutely.
So adding in as much as you can do, but again, it's like anything else, like you can instruct them in everything in terms of, be moderate with alcohol, with drugs, all of that stuff, avoid it. You can do all of that, but in the end, it's kind of up to them, right? When they're out in the world. So I think it's kind of similar in terms of you add the messaging that you can. And the big thing I always suggest, like for women, but I think for girls as well, is get them in some sort of physical activity so they can appreciate their bodies for more than just the way they look. I think that's really a big thing. And it doesn't have to be organized sports. I hated them, so it doesn't have to be that.
Right. Yeah. Like something else that reminds them how strong and capable that they are,
exactly.
That they feel proud of, right?
Yeah. Dance, anything, even something you do with them once a week, but just something that makes them discover their bodies as more than just the way they look. Because I think most of us discover our bodies as, oh, it doesn't look this way, or it's not this way, instead of understanding the power that they have.
I love that. I love that. And, I'm just like hearing our listeners, and I'm thinking they might be wondering, okay, but what if my kid doesn't want to do any of that, right? Like, how can I encourage something that they're so not interested in?
It needs to be, you have to like completely find something that they want to do because I relate to this. You know, I was the kid that my mom put me in gymnastics. I hated it. We had mandatory sports. I didn't like those. I wasn't good at them. But when I finally found what I enjoy, which is calisthenics, it's an individual sport. It's something that feels like play. So I really believe if you keep introducing them to things, like let them experiment, take them to small classes, then they can find something that is for them. And it doesn't need to be so organized. It literally can be once a week. It can be something like, oh, we go walk up this hill. Like it doesn't
Right.
have to be something so regimented as in, oh, I'm going to put them in soccer league. It can be very open, but it's about allowing them to find what they want to do because I agree. I was forced to do sports I didn't like. And it meant for years I had this relationship with fitness where I felt like I was never good enough and I didn't want to play or do anything.
Yeah, no, that's such an important point that you're making. I like how you're saying expose them to different things, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately let them decide, like let them
Yeah.
decide what they'll continue with and what they won't continue with and what they love. And something else that I feel as parents that we can do is like sometimes our words will only take us so far, right? Sometimes it's our actions, sometimes it's what we model. Like what are we doing for our health? Like, I know my husband's like a health nut and he's always doing something. He's either, I don't know, he's jumping out of helicopters to ski, which I so don't support. I support him, but like it scares the bejesus out of me. But anyways, but I see my daughter is modeling herself after him, wanting to have that healthy lifestyle, or like I have a yoga practice every night, like for 15 to 20 minutes before I go to bed. That's what I'm doing. And once in a while, one of my daughters will come and she'll join me. So whether she's like noticing it and joining me or just noticing it and placing it somewhere in her subconscious mind, I know that there's a messaging there that like we need to take care of our own wellness, right? And so just knowing like sometimes we as parents we have this wish like I want my kid to do this and I want my kid to be that, and it's like, okay, let's look in the mirror. What are we doing? How do we scale it back? Let's do that wellness routine for ourselves, and hopefully that will be passed on to our
Yeah.
girls, right?
I
Yeah.
mean, this is an incredible point because for me, my mom was athletic, but then when she had kids, she was not. So I never saw her doing anything. And that
Mm,
made it where I didn't particularly, I was already not great at fitness. I was forced to do it and I didn't see her doing it. And I believe that you're right. You know, if you see your parents doing this stuff, you want to join in. And I wish I could remember the name of it. There's a guy on Instagram and he does super calisthenics. You know, he's doing muscle ups and pull ups, and his 5-year-old daughter is doing them too now because
wow.
she saw her daddy doing it. And this girl's 5 years old and she can do more pull ups than me. It's,
Oh my God, I love it. Talk about starting them young, right?
exactly, yeah. And I'm sure she's doing it because she sees daddy doing it. It's not, I don't think that she woke up one day and decided to just do it. So that's a really important thing is modeling behavior, not just for your kids, but also for, you know, anyone in your family, for your friends. We're always inspiring people, whether we realize it or not.
For sure. No, for sure. Absolutely. I'm going to take like a little pivot here because
Yeah.
this is something I'd really love to know about. What are some of the unique self-image obstacles facing minorities? Because I noticed that that's becoming prevalent, or it's been prevalent. How do we manage that? How do we navigate that, and why?
Yeah. I think the first thing is, and this is changing, which is fantastic, is we have to see ourselves in those spaces. We
Mm,
have to see ourselves in the health space, in the fitness space, in the on magazine space. I remember, and you might remember this too, when I was growing up, I don't think there was anyone that was darker than had a tan on any sort of magazine cover. It was just that's the way it was. And there was never anyone that had naturally curly big hair, which I have.
mhm.
And I never saw that. So for me, it was never something that I could aspire to because I didn't see that as a possible thing. I didn't have, it wasn't beautiful to look the way that I did. So I would never try for those things. So the biggest thing is to be able to see yourself in those spaces. And that is happening so much more, not just with different minorities, but also with body shapes. And that's a huge thing, to know that you can do yoga at any size, to know that you can be a model at any ethnicity. That's the biggest thing. But also, a lot of the research that is done for fitness, for example, has traditionally been based on white men.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I think that we need to start doing research around how does it influence, first of all, women as well? How does fitness impact their bodies so we can understand what is best for them? But also for minorities, because I know I have wider hips, bigger bum, and the BMI for me is actually considered unhealthy if you're comparing it on a standard scale, but I have a different body composition. So we need to really look at what are the frameworks we're using to judge beauty and health, and how can we start to make them more inclusive of minorities, acknowledging that there is, a difference in that way.
That's so, so important. Yeah, like sometimes those metrics, they're just so off, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not the right message, like to have to look at the numbers and focus on that. I always say, like, throw away the freaking scale. Like, why do we even need scales? It's like if
Agree.
I wake up each morning and I feel good in my body and I feel healthy and I feel whole, that's all that should matter, right? Like, why are we always looking outside of ourselves for the answers when the most important answers are truly within? So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you saying that. And I love what you're saying about, celebrating ethnicities and sizes and making it like making our world an inclusive space, because at the end of the day, like the whole world is not a white woman with straight hair. You know what I'm saying? Like we need to see ourselves in the media, in culture, in things like this. And I think it starts with the individual, right? Like we may not be able to change the system as a whole, but if we can show up in our uniqueness, I think it makes us all more able to celebrate one another. And, it's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing that our diversity is what makes us beautiful. So I
Agree. And
appreciate that so much.
it's crazy because if you think about it, the majority of the population, especially in the States, is not white anymore. Like people are mixed, it's different, or they're different ethnicities, and it's really wild that they can't see themselves represented in different areas. So I think it's time, like it's been changing, which is great. I have a friend who, she's a personal trainer, and she's a beautiful Black lady who's bald.
Mhm.
And she did this picture on Instagram showing that they finally made a Barbie that looked like her. And she was so
Oh,
excited because she said, look, finally I can see me.
right.
And for someone who's grown up, white, blonde, straight hair, this is such a, you don't even think about it because, of course,
Sure.
you always saw that. But for
Right.
her, it's, she's 40 years old, and this is the first time that she's seen herself celebrated in a play toy that girls use every single day.
That is so beautiful. And I
Yeah.
I can even remember like being a little girl in the 80s, right? And seeing Barbie, because that's what we played with. Those were the
Yeah.
gifts that we were given. And even back then wondering, like, here I am, a Persian girl, Jewish girl, looking at this blonde Barbie, and I'm like, she's so pretty and I wish I could look like her, because that was the image that was laid out for us about what it is to be pretty. Like, why weren't they creating Barbies that looked like me and Barbies
Yeah.
that looked like you, right? And of course, that makes you think that you're wrong or you're not as you should be. So I love that Barbie is finally doing things like this as well. And I know that a lot of toy manufacturers have done similar things, and it's
Yeah.
about freaking time is what I have to say. Right? Um, yeah,
Okay.
about time. So I'm going to go back to what we were talking about before, because this one is weighing on me too. Like, so the story that I shared about people talking to me about you gained weight, you lost weight, your butt got bigger, things like that. Um, what if there's a young girl listening right now, or a parent of a young girl who wants to give their daughter tools and ways to respond to someone who says these inappropriate comments? Any thoughts on how we can guide them to be kind, right? But to also state their truth and be firm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to be firm. And one of the things that we tend to do a lot of times, for example, if someone says, "Oh, you lost weight," is we tend to say, "Oh, thank you." No, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Even if you didn't mean to. For example, I've had my wisdom tooth removed and I've had complications. So I've been eating soup. I'm sure I've lost weight. If someone says to me, "Oh, you lost weight," that's not a compliment. I've been in pain.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's the first thing, is to learn to not necessarily say thank you. That doesn't determine your worth because you've lost weight. But the other thing is to say, I don't talk about my body with others. My body is my own. I don't talk about it. This is not
Mm.
something that I want to hear, or you can even say, you can be very honest if it's family members, for example, and say, "I'm working on my body image. This is triggering for me."
Oh, yeah.
That's it. And it's hard. I'm going to admit it's very hard to say to strangers or acquaintances, but it's so important, I think, also as the parent or as the friend, to avoid saying things like that about people's appearance. So recently we went to see a friend, and I know that she struggles with, she's had eating disorders, she has body dysmorphia, and she was looking a lot leaner. And I purposely did not say, "You look thinner." I did not say it. I made an effort to not say it. My husband didn't say it because we knew that for her, that would be like, "Oh, I'm like so much worthy. I'm so much better." So I didn't say it, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that that's the big thing too, is it's not just responding to people, it's thinking about what you say to them as well.
For sure. For sure. We talk about this a lot in the Girl Life community, is like, how do we greet a girl? Like,
Yeah.
what's the first thing that we say to her? We notice that people are always saying things like, "You're so cute, you're so pretty, you're so this." And it's like, can we please focus on something that is a little bit deeper, deep into the foundation of who this girl is, what her interests are, what her passions are, what lights her up, what books she's reading, what she loves learning about in school. Why does it always tie back to the appearance? And when we continuously put focus on that appearance, that is where the child places her focus as well. And it's just not a healthy thing to constantly be worried about the way that you look and the way you appear to others. It's just not. It's great to celebrate yourself and love what you see in the mirror, right? But you don't want to be doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that that's the thing. And I really try to push this because you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, that I'm trying to promote this message of body positivity, but it's also this idea of body positivity tied up in health. So trying to get health away from diet culture, to
Mhm.
accept that we can nourish our bodies, but we don't need to focus so much on the way that they look. Because I feel that body positivity is an amazing movement, but it also has kind of taken away the health angle a little bit. And
Yes.
I think some people feel like if I mention that I also want to get healthy, that's somehow I don't accept my body anymore. And that doesn't have to be the case. You can go for both.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in terms of the entanglement or
Yeah,
the,
like the last thing that you said, it doesn't have to be both. Like help me understand this a little bit, disseminate it
yeah.
for me.
So a lot of people have this impression, and it's because of who is talking most in the body positivity movement, is this idea of, "I'm going to love my body no matter what," which is 100% fine, and you should and can. But I think it also kind of alienates some people because they think, well, what if that's not possible for me, for example? What if I don't feel like I can love my body? What if that's not something I can do? I don't have that confidence. I have so many years of struggling with it. And for those people, what you can focus on is more body neutrality. And body neutrality is all about accepting what my body can do, taking care of my body, not taking care of it because I wanted to get smaller or firmer or, quote unquote, better, but taking care of it so that I can do more, so I can live more life. And for me, I just think that you can do both then. In that way, you are focusing on health, but you're not focusing so much on the numbers or how you look. So I just want people to know that that's possible, like
I
you can
love
do
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And as we age, because inevitably, if we are all still here on this planet, we are aging, right? and we are grateful for it. We need to be grateful for it, but that is such a positive way to age, right? Like, what can my body do? What is the function of my body? Feels so much better than let me exercise and let me eat healthy just so I can be thin or lose belly fat. So like, that is super inspiring and super empowering. And I think a beautiful, beautiful note to end on. But before we do, two things. First of all, anything else you'd like to share with our audience that we didn't get a chance to touch on?
I think we covered the most important aspects of this whole movement, which is the inclusivity for body shape, for minorities, this idea of the messaging you pass on to your children and to young girls around you. It's just kind of highlights, doesn't it, that for things to change, it really is in multiple different pillars that we have to focus.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. And something that I either always start the podcast with or end the podcast with, today we're ending it with this. If there's one thing that you could share with your 8-year-old self, what would it be?
I'm taking a moment for everyone listening.
No, I appreciate that. I love that because I know that you're truly thinking about it and reflecting. I'm sure there are probably 12 messages that you'd like to give to your 8-year-old self, but it's like, what is the one that really could have served her?
I think the biggest one is sometimes you have to be the first. And just because you don't see someone who looks like you or comes from your background doing something you want to do, doesn't mean it's not possible, but it does mean that you might need to be the first. And there's many parts of my life where I've had to be the first, either in my community or my family, and it's very uncomfortable. But I wish that I had known that sooner, because I didn't really start to try it until my 20s. So I think that that's the biggest thing, is know that it's never necessarily impossible, but yes, you might need to be the first person to break those barriers or to do what you want to accomplish.
I love that answer. Perhaps one of the favorite answers I've ever heard on this podcast, because wow, boy, does that give people permission to do something that's different. I love that. Thank you so, so much for being here with us, Chardét. You've been so generous with your knowledge and your wisdom. And please let our amazing audience know, where can they find you? How can they get to know more about you and all the incredible work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for having me. It's been a great conversation. I've loved it.
Pleasure.
I can be found on feelgoodnaked.com, and that's naked without the E. That's also the name of the podcast. And you can see all the links there to Instagram, to my work. So Feel Good Naked.
Amazing. Thank you for being here with me. Loved our conversation.